They called me a beggar, right there, under a chandelier I paid for. My own father raised his glass and said I'd never contributed a dime to this family. Laughter followed. My mother looked away. My sister smirked like she'd finally won. I stood still, every word slicing through me, sharper than the silverware on their table. They didn't know the truth, the celebration they were so proud of. Every drop of champagne, every flower, every damn candle was mine. My name is Adelina Fairfax, and that was the moment I stopped funding my own humiliation. Charleston shimmered that night, the kind of Southern elegance my family prided themselves on. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, champagne poured like liquid applause. The Fairfax Centennial was supposed to honor a century of legacy, though everyone knew it was really about showing the city we still mattered. I hadn't been home in years. They said I'd changed. Too polished, too distant, too wrapped up in my own life. I smiled through the introductions, through the careful politeness that always masked condescension in this family. The air smelled like money and performance. Then my father lifted his glass. His voice carried across the ballroom, confident, rehearsed. To my daughter Serena, who carries our name with grace and charm, and to Adelina, our wanderer, too busy to be part of us. A polite ripple of laughter followed. My mother's eyes flicked away, unwilling to meet mine. Serena's smile curved just enough to draw blood. I set my glass down, its base hitting the table harder than I meant. "You're right, Father," I said evenly. "I don't belong here." The music faltered for half a second as I turned. The click of my heels cutting through the chatter. No one stopped me. They never did. What they didn't know was that every shimmering light above them, every bottle chilled on ice, every flower and note of jazz had been paid for through my company. Quietly, invisibly, completely. They thought they were celebrating themselves. They were standing inside my generosity. Pride, I realized, is far cheaper than silence. Outside, the night air smelled of salt and freedom. My phone buzzed with a message from Serena. "Don't forget the brunch tomorrow at the lake house. I want everything perfect." I stared at it until the words blurred, then deleted the message. I'd spent a lifetime funding perfection for them. The wind off the Ashley River tugged at my hair as I walked to my car, heels echoing against the stone. Somewhere behind me, the laughter resumed. Warm, hollow, and entirely paid for. Morning light slipped through the thin white curtains, settling across my desk, where a half-finished cup of coffee steamed beside my laptop and a stack of files. The quiet of the apartment was deceptive. It carried the kind of stillness that comes after years of noise. I used to believe success would finally make them proud, but all it did was turn me into their personal bank. Every call began the same way. "We hate to ask, but..." When my father retired early, I paid his insurance, his hospital bills, even his credit cards. When Serena launched her first boutique, I wired $150,000 with nothing more than her promise to pay me back someday. When my mother wanted a place by the lake for the family to gather, I bought the house at Hilton Head outright. Everything went through my company, Fairfax Holdings, LLC. My father once patted my shoulder and said, "You're the glue holding us together." I smiled, not realizing I was being cemented into a lie. 3 days after the gala, an email arrived from the bank. The subject line read, "Property title update, owner change notice." My name had been deleted from the lake house deed. In its place, Serena Fairfax. No explanation, no courtesy call. Just a single line, "Transfer completed." They hadn't only erased my name, they'd erased my contribution. Maybe family isn't about love, I thought. Maybe it's just the most emotionally expensive investment you'll ever make. I opened the cabinet, pulled out the folder marked Fairfax Holdings, legal, and added one handwritten note across a blank page. Audit, pending. Sunlight broke through the curtains, sharp and cold across the desk. For the first time, I saw it not as warmth, but as warning. That night, as I reviewed investment reports, my phone buzzed. A message from Serena flashed across the screen. "Don't come to the lake house anymore. It's not your place." I couldn't help but smile. "Good," I typed back. "Then I'll stop paying for its taxes." I opened my laptop again, logged into the bank portal. The list of automatic payments glowed on the screen. $3,200 for insurance, $980 for HOA fees, $6,700 for maintenance. I clicked cancel payment on each line. Every soft ping sounded like a chain breaking. I remembered Serena bragging once, her voice loud and sugar-sweet. "Dad bought us the lake house." I'd stood in the background, smiling politely, thinking how strange it felt to be invisible inside something I'd built. When I checked my archives, I found the folder labeled Contingency 2019. Buried inside was the clause I'd added myself years ago. All payments under Fairfax Holdings LLC remain proprietary to Adelina Fairfax. Just one sentence, enough to keep the house legally mine. "They took the title," I murmured, "but I kept the clause." I poured another glass of wine and watched the glow of the screen shimmer through the glass. "They think I'll shout," I said quietly, "but I'll audit instead." Rain began to fall outside, soft and steady, like a metronome counting down to reckoning. I opened a new file, Fairfax Trust, Inquiry. For the first time in years, I felt something dangerously close to peace. I wasn't the keeper of their comfort anymore. I was reclaiming the only family I had left, my own dignity. Morning fog pressed against the windows as I measured coffee into a mug. The knock came like a warning. Too hard, too loud for this hour. Evan Carter was on my doorstep, cheeks flushed, shirt rumpled, anger like steam around him. "You need to fix this right now. Adelina. The gardener quit. The HOA is calling. Taxes are overdue. Everyone's blaming us." He barked. I didn't invite him in. I held the door frame and said, calm as a ledger, "You're shouting at the landlord, Evan." He blinked. I pulled the gray binder from the shelf, Fairfax Holdings LLC, and showed him the page. Registered owner, Adelina Fairfax. He stammered. "No, that can't be." Richard said. "Richard says a lot of things," I cut in. "Signatures don't lie." I played a recording from my family calls folder. Serena's voice filled the quiet. "Adelina, you'll handle the bills again this month, right?" "Dad hates the paperwork," my younger voice answered. "Sure, send me the details." Evan went pale. "I've kept records of every favor for 3 years," I told him. "Every transfer, promise, insult. You called it family support. I call it unpaid labor." He spat a threat, turned, and left. I latched the door and poured coffee. My phone lit with an email. Frank Collins, family accountant. Subject, irregularities in Fairfax Trust. I smiled without warmth. "Good morning." "Indeed." Frank's voice on the line was careful, measured. "Adelina, I came across something concerning—" He read the filings. The transfers masked as an anonymous benefactor, while the ledger traced back to my LLC. "They used your money and erased your name," I said. A flat fact. He sighed. "It's worse. Your contributions were recorded as family trust income. That's tax fraud." The world narrowed to facts. Betrayal had a paper trail. "Preserve every document since 2017, I told him. "Don't contact them. I'll handle it." I opened a new folder, Fairfax Trust Investigation, and began dragging invoices, wire confirmations, and old emails into it. Then I found it. A faded note in an old contract, my father's handwriting. All household expenses handled by Adelina, until further notice. That little "until" had never been revoked. For years I believed silence kept peace. Now I saw silence kept receipts. I texted Frank, "This will go legal." The sun dipped low over the harbor, and for the first time in a long while, I felt deliberately awake. A creditor finally calling the family to account. I drove to Savannah that afternoon, the city's glass towers catching a pale winter light. Her office was exactly as I expected. Minimal, efficient, no distractions. Rebecca Lynn didn't bother with small talk. She read the files I handed over, eyes moving like a scanner, then looked up and said 3 words that felt like a punch. "They mortgaged it." "The loan," she explained, listed me as guarantor, roughly $480,000. For a moment, the floor tilted. They hadn't just taken a house. They'd taken my name to borrow against it. "They impersonated me," I said, voice steady. She slid a form across the desk. "Emergency asset freeze." "It stops transactions immediately," she told me. "It's legal and fast." I signed without hesitation. The ink dried like a verdict. That evening, Serena called. Panic and tears threaded through her words. "Did you freeze the accounts? Dad's furious. The loan office called." I listened, then answered plainly. "You used my name." Her accusation bounced back. "You're destroying us." I clipped the call. "I'm auditing," I told myself. For the first time, silence belonged to me. A week later, Charleston woke to headlines. The trust was frozen. Neighbors whispered in church foyers. My mother rang, voice breaking. "You humiliated your father." I replied, calm. "You did it yourselves. I filed the papers." My father texted a warning. I forwarded it to Rebecca. "Threats help your case," she said. Rebecca sent the preliminary audit. Flagged transfers. $42,000 for home repairs that had remodeled Serena's boutique. $18,000 labeled educational fund that bought a cruise. $31,000 for family maintenance that paid for a Mustang. At the bottom, a hidden line. Transfer to Fairfax Heritage Fund, $280,000. An unregistered slush fund. Serena the recipient. She wasn't merely complicit, she was running it. That night, Serena posted for sympathy. 100 comments of allegiance. I scrolled past. They perform pain online while I assemble facts offline. Rebecca asked, "Does social pressure bother you?" I shook my head. "I need evidence, not applause." Sarchat. She filed the suit. I walked the Riverwalk alone. The water steady and indifferent. Let them talk. Tomorrow they would have to answer. March in Charleston carried that damp, heavy wind from the ocean that always smelled faintly of salt and judgment. Inside the courthouse, the air was cool and sharp, the light harsh against the dark wooden benches. I sat beside Rebecca Lynn, her files neatly stacked, her posture straight as a blade. Across the aisle sat my parents and Serena, the same faces that once smiled at my expense, now pale beneath the weight of fluorescent truth. I hadn't come to destroy them. I came to prove that every dollar, every party, every inch of their reputation had been built on the checks that carried my name. Rebecca leaned closer and murmured, "When lies reach court, they stop being stories and start being math." "Good," I whispered back. "Let's do the math." Howard Mayfield, their attorney, rose with practiced indignation. "This is a misunderstanding," he declared. "Mrs. Fairfax was simply helping her family." Rebecca didn't even look at him. She clicked her remote, and the screen behind her lit up. 45 transactions, totaling $1.2 million, each labeled family expense. The courtroom fell quiet, the sound of paper shuffling replaced by the cold hum of projection light. Then came the contract for the Pendleton House, the centennial gala that started it all. My father's signature was nowhere on it. Only mine. Rebecca turned toward the bench. "Mr. Fairfax," she asked evenly, "who paid for your family's centennial event?" My father said nothing. The judge peered at the document. "According to this," he said, "it was your daughter, Ms. Adelina Fairfax." The silence was suffocating. My mother's head dropped. Serena covered her face, whispering something I couldn't hear. My father stared at the floor as if it might open and swallow him. The judge looked at me. "What are you seeking, Ms. Fairfax? Damages? Restitution?" I stood, my voice even. "Truth on paper, Your Honor. That's all." When the ruling came, it was brief and precise. just like Rebecca's work. The lake house and the Fairfax Trust would be transferred legally to me. My family would repay the funds they'd misused, and I would be recorded as the sole financial sponsor of the Fairfax Centennial Celebration. Outside, the air smelled of rain and oak leaves. I stepped into it, the courthouse doors closing softly behind me. I didn't feel triumph, only quiet relief. The wind moved through the trees, scattering dry leaves like signed verdicts drifting to the ground. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. Rebecca joined me on the steps, her voice low and sure. "You didn't just win, Adelina," she said. "You rewrote the family ledger." A week after the verdict, Charleston woke to a headline stretched across the front page of the Post and Courier. "Fairfax family found guilty of financial misuse. Daughter wins legal ownership." The photo beneath it showed my parents leaving the courthouse, my mother shielding her face with a trembling hand, while my father stared at the ground as if it might still offer him dignity. The people who once idolized them, neighbors, church friends, the kind of Charleston elite who survive on gossip and appearances, fell suddenly silent. Some crossed the street when they saw me. Others smiled too brightly, pretending they'd always admired my strength. I didn't read the comments. I'd spent a lifetime hearing other people's versions of my story. I wasn't about to give them one more chance to rewrite it. The silence didn't bother me anymore. I had learned that sometimes the quiet that follows scandal isn't shame, it's peace reclaiming its place. An email arrived from Serena 3 days later. The subject line read simply, "Please." Her message was short. "Can we talk? Maybe settle this privately? Please, for Dad's sake." I read it twice, then typed back, "You should have cared about Dad before you used his name to steal mine." I didn't hit send immediately. I let it sit there for a few minutes, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat, before pressing enter. Some truths deserve to land without hesitation. 2 months later, the lake house went up for auction. The ballroom where it was held was smaller than the court, but the atmosphere carried the same weight, a crowd of quiet faces, a mix of curiosity and judgment. The property sold quickly, to a real estate trust that offered nearly twice its appraised value. I watched the bidding unfold without flinching, my expression steady, detached. When the gavel fell, the applause was polite, uncertain. Every cent from that sale went straight into a new account, Fairfax Women's Trust. The name made a few attendees shift uncomfortably. I wanted it that way. It was a fund dedicated to women who'd been financially trapped or manipulated by their families. Women who, like me, had paid the price of loyalty until they could no longer afford it. My father came to the auction near the end. He stood at the back of the room, smaller somehow, his once confident posture replaced by something quiet and fragile. When the crowd began to disperse, he walked over. "Was this revenge?" he asked softly, as if the answer might still absolve him. I met his eyes and shook my head. "No, Dad," I said. "This was balance." He nodded once, not in agreement, but in resignation, and turned away before I could see his expression fully. I didn't follow. There was nothing left to explain. The scales had leveled themselves, after everyone was gone. I stayed in the room for a while, listening to the faint echo of chairs scraping against marble, of a hammer striking wood one final time. The echo reminded me of something Rebecca once said. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs paperwork and goes home. When I finally returned to my apartment by the river, Charleston's skyline was painted in the soft gold of early evening. My phone buzzed over and over. Messages, missed calls, statements from the press. I let them pile up on the screen without reading a single one. On the table waited a cream-colored envelope. Inside was an invitation to the opening ceremony of the Fairfax Women's Trust. I stood by the window, watching the sun slide beneath the horizon, the river glinting like molten silver. For years I'd been told that legacy was about what you leave behind. But as I traced the embossed lettering of my own name on the invitation, I realized how wrong that was. "Maybe legacy isn't what you leave behind," I whispered. "It's what you take back." The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to make me uneasy. This time, It felt right. The kind that follows the closing of a long, overdue chapter. 6 months later, on a warm summer afternoon, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just 3 handwritten words on the front. For your records. Inside was a single photograph. Me, walking out of the Fairfax Centennial. The chandeliers behind me glowed like a fading constellation. My face was turned slightly toward the door, eyes fixed ahead, as if I already knew that was the last time I'd ever look back. On the back of the photo, in Serena's familiar handwriting, was one sentence. This was the day everything fell apart. I held the picture for a long time. The edges were smooth, but the memory cut deep. In the months since the trial, I'd learned something I never understood before, that not every fracture is a tragedy. Some breaks are necessary, the way light needs space to enter. I walked down to the river. The afternoon sun turned the surface of the water silver, bright and soft all at once. I set the photograph on the rippling edge and let it go. The current caught it instantly, carrying it out toward the open harbor. No, Serena, I whispered. This was the day I stopped financing my own erasure. When the photo disappeared from sight, I turned away from the water and toward the glass building ahead, where a banner fluttered in the light breeze. Fairfax Women's Trust, empowering women to reclaim what's theirs. Inside, the faint sound of a piano drifted through the open doors. I straightened my jacket, drew in a steady breath, and stepped inside. No applause greeted me, no cameras flashed, but I didn't need them anymore. For the first time, I understood peace that didn't ask for permission.